Hey everybody, welcome back to the Shacknews E3 live show. I am your host of the moment, David Craddock, and I am joined today by Al from Creative Assembly. Al, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no.
Nice to be here in the drawing room.
Oh, I know. It's so nice, right? It's like a Shack Masterpiece Theater.
I feel like I should have brought my smoking jacket.
I know, we've had that comment so often.
Yeah.
So you're here to talk about Total War Warhammer 2.
That's right, yeah.
I'd like to go back a little bit to the first game.
Yeah.
I think that the fusion of Total War and the Warhammer properties is really interesting. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how that came about.
It's actually something we, as a studio, have been sort of back and forth talking to Games Workshop about it for quite a long time, because it doesn't, like, you put Warhammer next to Total War and it doesn't take too much of a leap of intuition to realise how well these things might work together.
Yeah.
You know, Total War is essentially about moving blocks of troops around, at least on the battle side, you know, and you know, arranging them into combat and performing flank attacks and looking for hammer and anvil opportunities and all those kind of tactical nuances, and that's exactly what tabletop war games are all about as well. So it's you know, it's a perfect match, and I think amplified by the fact that we have the campaign game as a sort of a meta game, the wrapper, the thing that gives context to each and every battle you play in the campaign. Because within that we can expand further on those races and involve so much more character backstory and unique mechanics that reflect the way those races work in the lore and the backstory in the tabletop game as well. I mean, you know, then the other thing is, so the way we normally make our historical games is we go book shopping in pre-production. We buy an awful lot of books about a period. So we're learning about Rome.
You're talking my language right there.
You're right. Yeah. So there's a lot of research we need to do. And Warhammer, making Total War Warhammer, really wasn't so different. It's just that the history books are full of goblins.
Sure. And you know, I mean, like you said, Warhammer kind of is derived from a tabletop war game setting.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of a good match there.
Absolutely. Yeah. A very good match. And just returning to that idea of the campaign game giving, you know, context to the battles. I mean, that's something we've always kind of done in Total War. But in some sense, it's amplified when you add Warhammer into the mix, because we've got very strong, well-defined characters that we're dealing with, and we made a decision with Warhammer, the original one, quite early on, that we wanted character to be a big part of it. And it's a massive, you know, every army book for every race in Warhammer has a series of legendary lords, characters, heroes that you can buy and stick in your army, and then take to battle and use their unique mechanics, their unique weapons with. And that's something we really wanted to reflect. And the way those dart back and forth between the campaign game and the battle game, and you see them evolve every time. You know, you go into a battle and your lord goes in and does tremendous damage, gains loads of XP.
Yeah.
You come out, you're in the campaign game, you level him up. Oh, suddenly you unlock a quest for him, and he's got a unique quest chain with unique quest battles, and so you take him off down that path, and you get very close to these characters, and you know, that's something that is quite unique, that Warhammer has, you know, really brought to Total War to make it very different from any game we've done before, really. So
really,
it's been a really wild ride to make.
That sounds really interesting, because I know the first game, the campaign, Total War Warhammer 1, had more of a sandbox style campaign, but this one was much more quest and character driven, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it was the same. It was still sort of quest and character driven in the first one.
Right.
But this time around, we've got a sort of overarching narrative to the entire campaign, regardless of which race you play as.
Right.
You kind of get sucked into, if you're pardon the pun, into the great Vortex campaign, which is, so the heart of the campaign is, it's all based around this geographical feature in the Warhammer, in the New World, which is the map area, the kind of part of the Americas, if you will, of the Warhammer world that we deal with in Total War Warhammer 2. In Ulthwan, which is the home of the High Elves, there's this great swirling vortex, which was forged in aeons past by the High Elves to essentially suck the winds of magic out of the world and blast a massive chaos invasion that was going on back to the portals they came from, and back to their realm, the realm of chaos. And it's still there, and it's been in the world for millennia, preserving the magical equilibrium and making sure chaos can't invade or matter like they did before. But as will be revealed as you start to play the campaign, something has happened to destabilise the vortex, and all the races see an opportunity either to, some of them want to heal it, some of them want to mend it, preserve that equilibrium, and some of them simply want to destabilize it, release lots of crazy energy and exploit that for their own end.
Kind of jockeying for position.
And that's exactly what it is. It's a jockeying for position. It's a race, because a race to the end, the final endpoint, the final kind of domination of the Vortex and ownership of the Vortex. And this is something that we've never done in a Total War game before. This is a completely new approach for us to have an overriding narrative with its own suite of gameplay mechanics that you can engage with to get to the end of the race before the other guys do. We have a piece of sort of user interface that tracks the progress of each of the races. So you'll see races try and jump ahead, and to do that they need to perform these rituals, which are like long-winded, multi-turn spells, effectively that are cast on the campaign map. At which point you're vulnerable to attack, and because other racers will want to come along and stop your rituals, because they're the things that jump you along the track. Right. And it's also, along with this, you've got this lovely kind of new mechanic, which brings a sense of rising tension as well to the campaign game. Something again we haven't had before, but it's also enabled us to bring in lots and lots of storytelling about those races, about their motivations, about the characters in them, about the manipulation between different factions within that race, and be able to tell those stories through that series of rituals that leads to what is ultimately quite a cataclysmic endgame conclusion. And again, a good reason we've done that is because previous Total War games, quite often you've all but won the game, even if you haven't completed all your victory objectives, because you're so big. If you own half the map, no one's going to challenge you, unless there's somebody else, another faction that's done so well it owns the other half of the map, then you're in for a big doozy, right? So, but most of the time, if you've got half the map, it's a slow painting by numbers game. You grab the territories as you go, and you're a fairly unstoppable force. So this is our kind of experiment to inject something more focused, something more narratively focused that pulls you along with it to a sort of defined endpoint, and crucially one that you can lose as well.
Well, you have such a wealth of lore to draw from. I read something just recently that you announced that I think the Dark Elves, use slaves as a resource.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
right? Yeah. That's pretty cool. I think that's part of it's one of the most unique aspects of strategy games, is that through gameplay mechanics, you can kind of root those mechanics in lore.
Absolutely, yeah. We do that, and we're doing it actually probably more so with 2 than we did in the first game. In the first game, we knew it was important to differentiate the races, and not just in battle. You look at 2 different armies, like a greenskin army and an Empire army in Warhammer, the tabletop game, and you know that they're different. They're fundamentally different. They have completely different creatures. Some have, high-tech cannons and rocket launchers, and the other guys just want to charge towards you and hit you with stuff. So, just visually, they're going to work differently, and that's almost a given that that's going to happen when you're making a Warhammer game in Total War. Right. It is the campaign game where that greater development really happens, that greater differentiation really happens, and that's between kind of the core mechanics between the races, as you've suggested. So the High Elves are much more politically focused. They have a kind of politics side game almost, where you'll through different activities that you'll conduct in the campaign map, through use of heroes as you put them out into the world, and through dilemmas that you're offered from time to time in the game, you as a sort of race leader will generate influence. And as that influence rises, new options become open to you. So, for example, we've always had it so when you want to recruit a new general, okay, you want to build a new army, so the first thing you do is recruit a general and you build up his army around him, right? So he's the leader of the army. And we've always had all the generals for a race tend to be the same cost. I mean, they're all the same cost, effectively. They just differ in the traits they have and the skills they have. Some have some negatives, so that that's a clear, well, I'm not going to get him unless I've run out of positive guys to get. Some have a mix of the two, and they might actually be worth getting, even because they're negative, because they've got a really good positive trait. This time around, we've got, and particularly for the High Elves, we've got generals of different quality. And when you first start the game, when your influence is very low, there's certain generals you just can't recruit because you don't have anywhere near enough influence to expend to get those guys on side.
Right.
So later in the game, when you've become much more influential, they'll open up as kind of recruitable, and then suddenly you've got super powerful generals which you can build your armies around. So that's that whole influence, intrigue at court kind of side of it is where we're kind of pushing the design of the High Elves too. Likewise, they're very politically manipulative. They love, as I said, they love intrigues at court. They love scenes of wit, displays of wit and stuff like this. So we've got a system for them also built around the influence system, where you can take your influence into diplomacy with you, and you can alter how other factions see you, or you can alter how other factions see each other. So you can be in a situation where, let's say you're being attacked by a faction, and you're on the back foot here. Maybe they've got more regions and armies than you have, and it's pretty bad. You can sort of really dial up your diplomacy and your friendship and your alliance making with another faction by expending influence and going, well, you really do want to help us, we'll make it worth your while, really. You can really manipulate them, and suddenly, they're on your side. It might have taken a lot more time for another race to do that, whereas they can sort of superpower that. Or they can turn that faction against those ones, and then suddenly they're fighting on two fronts, and the threat against you is reduced as a result. So there's a lot of kind of fiddling around you can do with the High Elves, and nobody else gets that.
And it sounds like a fun way to kind of play to these racial archetypes. In a lot of fantasy literature and lore, you have the elves are so snobbish and distant. They turn their noses up at the problems of the rest of the world.
Of the lesser races.
That's right. Yeah. Which is everyone but elves.
Precisely. They're very superior.
Right. So what is that like from a balancing perspective? You have these different kind of ideologies, almost that define races, and yet they still have to clash in battle. What is that like from a balancing perspective?
So balance is always an ongoing challenge, right? And the one thing possibly the one thing that defines Warhammer more than any other factor is asymmetry, because everything's so enormously different. And
that's true.
But you can find balance in asymmetry, right? You can find, and we're confident we found that in the first game. And going back to Warhammer 1, a good example is dwarfs versus vampire counts. Dwarfs, massive gun lines, cannons, flame cannons, guys with rifles, gyrocopters dropping bombs and firing steam cannons. They've got really a tremendous selection of ranged weapons, like probably the best selection in the game. Vampire counts don't even have bows. Skeletons don't have bows and arrows. They don't throw things. They don't fire things. They just walk in. They stagger inexorably towards the enemy and chew them up with their waves of zombies and their massive monsters, and lots of flying creatures as well. To be fair, those things are not apples. You can't make apples to apples comparisons between those things. But through lots of playtesting and we actually have a really neat auto-testing system in house that we use to. So essentially, it's sort of like folding at home, if you remember that, distributed computing. So we have an auto-testing system that kicks in after hours, and it takes over everybody's PCs, and it turbo runs battles. It turbo runs campaigns, just AI versus AI. So whoever's got time on the system, and it might be one of the battle designers, they might go, okay, I really need to test these two factions against each other, or I'm worried this unit is a bit OP. I want to auto-test this unit in battle against one of every other unit in the game. So he sets up the script, boom, come back in the morning, and we've got stats about how that stuff works.
Oh wow, so that's nice because it kind of gives you a jump ahead. Usually in games, playtests, you have to wait until tens, hundreds, thousands of people are beating on it.
Precisely.
And then you have to scramble to issue patches.
And in all honesty, it gets us pretty close. But it's still no substitute for putting a game out there and people playing and giving you feedback, because it's not always about numbers, it's sometimes about feel. It's sometimes about, you've got a monster which it might be a bit overpowered for its price, right? Or let's say, no, there's a better example. Let's say we've got a big monster which is a bit underpowered for its price, right?
Okay.
So we could really easily fix that by dropping the price, by making it a cheaper unit, right? But that kind of pushes it into a different category when we want it to be in a more valuable category. So let's give it a skill. Let's read up on it in the Warhammer books, right, and see what kind of stuff it's got in its backstory and its lore, how it's been used in historical battles in the Warhammer universe, in the novels. You know?
Sure.
So maybe it's performed this particularly neat trick on the campaign map. So let's build a skill around. Let's build an activatable skill around that. You know, and then suddenly you've got something which is the same price, actually works better because it's got a new ability and it's more fun to use and it's more characterful and more flavourful because you've given it a skill rather than just dropping the price.
Yeah.
So, and this is one of the absolute joys of working with Warhammer as a base, as a sort of as a base to work from, is that we've got so many levers and pulleys in play. We can carry on making stuff interesting and improving stuff. Not just in a really technical sense, but in a kind of qualitative, kind of lore-driven sense as well. So yeah, it's really cool.
Well, when you mentioned feel being important, did you have kind of an avenue through which you could poll the community and get feedback on the first game and carry that into this one?
I mean, we're very close with our community. We're very communicative with our community. We pride ourselves on that, actually. And they do tell us when they like or don't like certain things. Right. So, we analyse that. We look at that. We see how many, we see how many people are talking about a thing they particularly like, and we're like, we should do more of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Not just rinse and repeat, but stuff that gives you that level of fun. We should do more stuff like that.
Right.
In the same way, if a feature isn't particularly liked, then we'll do less of that. Or you know what? We'll change it in an update. We'll change the way it works. We'll alter it so it becomes a more meaningful mechanic, or or whatever it is. And we very much do listen to our community when they ask for stuff as well. So we were very, very thrilled to announce that we've got a free-for-all mode in multiplayer recently.
Oh, cool.
Which is 4-player, everybody dives in. It's all versus all. It is carnage. It is so much fun because.
Well, it's kind of nice to cut loose a little bit. There's so much tactics and have to think 10 steps ahead.
Exactly.
And then this is just kind of you're cutting loose.
It absolutely is, yeah. And you'll be in a situation where you're under pressure from the word go, and the normal kind of defensive or offensive tactics that you may use, you may be under too much pressure to sort of deal with that. So you'll have to use your army creatively and quickly because it's all going to kick off in no time at all.
Yeah.
And you get these shifting alliances building up in a single battle between players. You get you'll get two players who'll maybe they're Skyped up, maybe they've arranged to play together. So the other guys suddenly realise that, and they've got to do something. They've got to kind of cooperate. And it also kind of means you can't sit at the back and camp. Because the point scoring system works, you tick over, score goes up the more damage you deal, the more damage your army deals. So if you're playing a super defensive army, you sit in the corner of the map with your sides protected by the 90-degree angle and the wall. And
that's a very diplomatic way to put it, because strategy games, some players are those turtlers.
Yeah, exactly, exactly that. Yeah, you can't really do that in free for all because you get a bonus for being last man standing, but you'll get many more points for dealing lots of damage, and that's going to make kind of glass cannon armies really fun to play.
Sure.
So stuff like the Wood Elves are going to be really fun to play in free for all because they're brittle as anything, but they can lay down a tremendous swathe of range damage. So yeah. And that has been an asked for feature, and we're like, yeah, we really ought to do this now. So we're doing it for Warhammer 2. So ta-da. Yeah.
And you got some features and content as pre-order content, right? I believe that just went live.
Yeah, that's right. We've got a new race based on an existing AI race, but completely reworked with loads of new units added and loads of new creatures and stuff. That's going to be the kind of early adopter bonus. So if you pre-order Warhammer 2, you get that content for Warhammer 1.
Oh, nice.
And you get it before launch as well, so you'll be able to play it before Warhammer 2 comes along. And it's an early adopter bonus, so we're making it clear it's not just a pre-order incentive, it's an early adopter bonus, so it'll be available still shortly after launch if you just buy the game. So we're not restricting you to pre-ordering.
Okay, and launch is, it's not far off now. I think it's late September, so you're kind of in the home stretch.
Frighteningly close, actually, yes. Yeah, so 28th of September, just down the road.
Okay. Well, what are you guys working on now? What does this last phase entail at this process?
So where are we now? So, sorry, we're around beta phase. So alpha is our sort of what we term content complete phase. and that's when we've got all the mechanics in, we've got everything in, we've got all the units and the spells and all the abilities, everything's in there. Everything just needs tweaking and balancing and polishing, right? The game is ultimately utterly playable at alpha time, but it's nowhere near ready for public consumption because it needs a tremendous amount of balancing. And largely that's what we do. We balance and we bug fix and we play test and we play test and we play test through that beta period. So that's where we're at now.
Yeah, and that's probably an all hands process, right? Everybody just play testing.
Very much, yeah, very much. So if you know, animators who've been working on specific units would just be playing the game, looking at how their creatures interact between other creatures. You know, the campaign designers will be looking to see whether the campaign mechanics they've designed for the races that they've worked on are going to be particularly balanced and are working and are gelling and are making sense, you know, making kind of a conceptual sense in the game. So yeah, everybody's just head down, testing the hell out of everything and just tweaking and improving and balancing. So that's us until launch, basically.
Excellent. And it's a late September release.
Yeah, 28th, yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming on to talk about it. I'm looking forward to it. And it sounds like you guys really have a handle kind of on the balance between the lore and the tactics there.
Yeah, I think that'll be exciting. Yeah, we're in a good place, I think. So.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, this concludes our current interview for the Shacknews E3 live show. Stay tuned. We've got a post show coming up shortly.